You can tell my business prowess by noticing that I got registered in Alaska and Wyoming, the two least populous states. But they're cool places to go to. I'm a stunt double this morning for Benjamin. He and Ron put this project together, and the two firms have had a joint venture for 30 plus years where we've usually reserved the joint venture work for offshore, and so we've used that to work for IBB and then various foreign entities and high power medium wave mostly and that, but occasionally we're friendly competitors because we're geographically separated, but occasionally we get together and do a project in the U.S., and this is an example of one that we've done together. Ron and Ben have done all the heavy lifting, and I kind of watched from afar. This 3 stations in Miami, which actually the client had worked for both, both firms do work for him over the years, and so they looked at these 3 stations. All of them sort of had marginal signals in Miami, and the idea was to try to find some improvement that could be had and sort of do what's been happening in the FM band of moving stations around to provide better service and provide more people and a consistent service. And so, our challenge here was to look at these 3 stations that were put through the whole Miami area and try to come up with a way to provide at least one station that had coverage of most of the metro area, and then try to improve the 2 others. All 3 of these stations are licensed to communities that are in the urbanized Miami area, and so you can see those 2 areas, and if you've ever wandered through that area, you know that is definitely lots of folk there, and in urbanized areas. And question of how can these facilities be improved? The 3 stations had significant overlap amongst themselves, as far as duplicate coverage, but they also had significant overlap with prohibitive overlap with other stations because of their historical allocation issues. Also, if anybody's done any AM work in Florida, you know that our friends in Cuba have always provided a remarkable addition to the puzzle, and it can be rather troublesome. Then, of course, also in Florida, there's saltwater paths that go up the coast and then across the Gulf that also have to be considered in the allocation process, so that we don't gore someone's ox quite far away. So you have to be careful of those issues. One of the things that's also became obvious very early on in the project was we didn't want to have to build any new towers or go through any local land abuse process, because most of us realize that now we're not sure we can live long enough to go through those kind of discussions. And then, of course, trying to find a situation where we could go to the commission with a solution that didn't require any waivers, because that was also a time issue there that would take some time. First thing we did was look at the allocation situation of the 3 stations, and the 990 had limits to the north, and the 1020 had limit to the north, and then also to the southeast to Grand Turk. That was seriously limited what it could do. The 1040 limited by a station in the Tampa area, but already at 25 kilowatts and providing pretty decent coverage. But the question with it was it at the right site, and then could we make it better? For nighttime allocations, they were all sort of equally bad, but they could be worked with. In dealing with foreign stations, it's often a challenge in this part of the world, because not everybody played along with the Region 2 agreement. Cuba and Dominican Republic didn't play along, and then there's several other Caribbean countries that will do what that agreement says, but are not members of the club. So you really have to be cognizant of all of the allocation situation there. The CDBS is not particularly the best source of this information. The ITU data is the appropriate data. Sometimes it's a little trouble to get a hold of that and sort through that, but it takes a bit of a rather serious set of sieves to go through and sort the data and find out what's real and what's not real and what's appropriate. And so that's something Benjamin just enjoys. So I guess it's a mental illness or something, but. But we always make sure that he gets at least one hit at that before we let anybody else look at. Also, the rural radio rules. Like I said, this was sort of the FM move-in concept for AM, and the rural radio rules were designed to kind of slow some of that activity down and still, provide some service to the outlying communities. But because of this, it made things a little more challenging. 990 and 1040 were not mutually exclusive frequencies, meaning that they weren't within 30 kilohertz of each other. And so if we wanted to change the frequency of either one of those stations to the other, it meant that we had to go to a major major change filing, and that hasn't happened since 2004, and we don't expect one in the near future. The other side was looking at contingent applications with the FCC, so we had to go through looking at the contingent application rules and, realizing that, we had to provide a situation that would reduce interference and, increase interference-free areas and serve more area. So that's the thing that we had to look at with it. And looking at these facilities, it seemed like the 1040 was the best choice for serving Miami, but the question was it at the appropriate site, and so we had to kind of look at the situation. The 1020 and 1040 couldn't have a 5 millivolt overlap, so we thought putting the 1040 signal at the Miami site and then moving the 1020 signal as far away as we can get it would be the appropriate way to approach that. So the farthest north site and the one that was farthest away was the Boynton Beach site, and then we moved the 990 to Kendall. So I guess that explains that too. All three cities are in the Miami urbanized area, so we could change city of license instead of changing frequency, and then shuffle the sites or shuffle the signals appropriately to be at the appropriate sites, and that met the rural radio rules and was administratively an easier way to do that. So no waivers would be required. The next challenge was, we figured out the allocation side of it. The next challenge was, what do we do with what's on the ground? So we went Ben and Ron went and spent a number of days down there digging through all of the bits and pieces in the swamps and try to figure out what needed to happen. The Kendall site, a 6-tower array, going from 1020 to 990. So that was looking at its bits and pieces. The Boynton Beach site going from 1040 to 1020, a 4-tower array, and then also 990 being modified to the 1040, which is a 6-tower array. So there was a number of things that needed to happen. So looking at those facilities, they developed antenna patterns that would fit on that geometry of arrays, and thus alleviating any need to go through any FAA process or 106 or local land abuse, which could be just incredibly painful there. And to get out of those processes was a great benefit. So here's an example of the contour here. So this is the 990 that moves from Miami down south. So it extends the coverage for the 990 signal down further south considerably. And then the 1020 moves north to provide coverage in the north area there, and it actually provided city grade coverage to Boynton Beach. The previous facility there actually did not do that in its previous situation. 1040 of course moves to the center site in Miami, and then becomes 50 kilowatts a day and provides good signal strength all over the whole area, and was sort of the ultimate goal and the prize of this whole exercise. And so, the contingent rules, we couldn't increase any overlap to domestic stations or increase the 25% RSS, and had to reduce interference, and we were able to reduce interference for all three stations. And then, we also had to pay attention to the international stuff. Anyway, in any case, it provided one station that was tall, thin, and blonde, and the other ones were not too bad anyway when we were done. So, and here's some of the wonderful spaghetti maps that demonstrate the reduction of coverage. We had a plethora of measured data from over the years of all three of these sites, and so you can see that these contours are based on measured data, which measured data has square corners administratively. So, and there's the other two stations. Then the question was, well, all right, what do we do to the plants? You've got these existing facilities, and Ron and Ben were able to come up with some elegant solutions. The Kindle site, all it needed was a couple of parts changes and Ron's steady hand, and adjusted it, and it did exactly what it needed to do without any major surgery or serious abuse. The Miami site needed a little bit more work done to it. Primarily, we were going to use the existing ATU facilities and phaser facilities, and they were designed for 5 kilowatts, but how do you put a 50 kilowatt in a 5 kilowatt box? And the answer is you call Ron Rackley. And and so they figured out how to do this. An example of one of the things they did was a common point network. There was a bit of a snug fit real estate wise in that cabinet, but if they took it to a leading T network instead of the lagging T network that was there, which had 3 coils and I think 3 capacitors, and so they yanked all that out and just put in a couple of big vacuums and 1 big coil, and then adjusted it or designed it so that it would have the lowest current that we could do at that point, and put it in that box, and then, of course, as with all of these things, hope for the best. And so there were some other changes in some of the ATUs, but it was all able to accomplish within the real estate constraints and that were there as well. I think I was trying to remember what all they did with transmitters. There was a bit of shuffling in transmitters, but I think 2 of the sites got new transmitters, and then there was some issue of what you did with various backups and the like. But the Boynton Beach site was not a lovely facility. As you can see from this picture, where the swamp is reclaiming that ATU, it wants it back, and it's a bit sad, although the fence seems to be smiling. But in any case, it was after a little bit of inspection of it, they realized that it was best to start over. So they were able to replace buildings there in the existing footprint, and essentially replace the whole antenna feed system. So in any case, the objective was met, and now the question is what do you do with it, and that's the other department. So. But thanks. Let me know if you got any questions.